All right, we are live. Hey, everybody. Thanks again for joining. This is the Vikings, and I've got a special guest, the Eagles, RJ, on with me. I might get the Chargers or a few others on here in a little bit, but wanted to get back in touch with you guys around post trade deadline. We did have the two buyers and sellers pre deadline conversations and podcasts, but we wanted to get back in touch now that all the deals have been made and we've had one more week of games been played to give a little bit of feedback in terms of the moves that were made, the moves that weren't made, and where we feel like things kind of sit at this point. So you guys have heard me talk plenty. RJ, you want to say anything? You want to introduce yourself? I think this is the first time we've had you on one of these pods, right?
This is. Yeah. I mean, I'll probably maintain like being a fixture on these podcasts if I can separate myself from work and other things like that.
Nice. Well, I mean, that's the best part. I mean, I used to try and stay up late and do these podcasts, and then I had kids, and now it's get as much sleep as humanly possible. So, same kind of idea: separate from work a little bit and get this recording in because it's fun, but at the same time, not get yourself in trouble with the wife.
Right.
Anyways, so what we've done here is I took down the trades from the deadline, and really I set up the deadline as from the end of I think it was week 8 until actual start of games on Thursday, since that's kind of the deadline trades. There may have been some that got filtered in beforehand that would have impacts, but I think we already talked about those. So really, it's the idea of talking about the newer trades that either we may have lightly touched on or not touched on at all, and kind of how that adjusts things. So, kind of just starting with the top in the AFC North. Last week we are looking at whether this was Bengals' division just to run away with, or whether the Browns could put up a fight. One more week in, the Browns beat the Bengals, I believe, last week. So now they
Yep.
are tied at 9-3 at the top of the division, and the Bengals are hanging on because of their higher points for. The Steelers are at 7-5, and the Ravens at 6-6. So I think we had said the Ravens were probably out of it, but maybe not 100%. Now it looks like they, being 2 games back of any wild card, are probably out at this point. The Steelers are hanging on by a thread, but the Bengals and Browns look to be in the mix to really run this down to the end. Just in terms of the deals that were made, the Bengals gave up Wesley Woodyard and a 5th and a 4th, and in result got Brandon Wilson and Reggie Bonifant. So not major moves, which were surprising, especially considering the state of the quarterback position. But he's playing with house money since he actually won last year, so can't be too surprised. He protected McCaffrey with Bonifant, but otherwise just kind of sticking with what got him there at this point. Any other thoughts from your side?
No, I mean, I do think picking up McCaffrey's handcuff was a really smart idea, especially trying to go into the playoffs this year. His utilization is ridiculous, and Bonifant probably would pick up some percentage of that if he even somewhat got injured. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
The,
And I mean, Bonifant is on a 4-year deal here. I think Cowboys picked him up as a rookie in the draft. So it's also not a one and done thing. It looks like he may be in place there, and if McCaffrey, it isn't this year, it might be next year. And there's a lot of running backs coming out next year, so I know there's a lot of I'll call it Kentucky windage in any projections at this point. But definitely not a bad thing to lock up McCaffrey's backup for the foreseeable future if Bonifant can hang on to that role. In contrast, we have the Cleveland Browns, who did make quite a few moves to try and reposition themselves. Although during the Buyers and Sellers podcast, we were thinking, wait a second, he's selling a lot of things. Is he not making a playoff push? But here we go, and beats the Bengals, and now is tied for the top of this division. So in terms of give and get, gave up a Bengals fifth, a Browns fourth, a Chargers fifth, Mason Rudolph, Russell Gage, and his Browns punter. And in return, got Vinny Curry, Brandon Carr, Daquan Jones, Xavier Rhodes, Justin Jackson, the Falcons punter, Rashaan Evans, and the Cardinals third. So a lot of folks were thinking, wait a second, maybe he's reloading, but it looks like he's actually positioning himself while also picking up some capital for the future. So well done at the deadline. And this is not a team to be overlooked on the AFC.
No, I completely agree. The Browns have been playing it pretty smart all year.
Mhm.
I do know for a fact he was trying to like really push into that tanking, but the schedule just did not work out well for him. He didn't get rid of a lot of like higher end pieces earlier in the season when he was trying to get lower in points. So like he was able to look at the schedule at one point and just go, well, I might as well make some push. I mean, worst case scenario, he wins, or best case scenario, he wins the division and he basically pays for, some amount of the money that he's already invested into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the trades were really smart. I know Mason Rudolph. He really wanted to get off of having Mason Rudolph. It was just like an accumulation of points in a position that he already had something. So he might as well spread it out to one of his really bad off defensive positions, which I know he was able to do. The Vinny Curry and the Brandon Carr trade, he gave up minor picks for him,
Mm-hmm.
which was, I mean, good. They're established veterans. Worst case scenario is they're going to have a reasonable snap count and an opportunity to score points every week.
Yeah, I mean the one thing that this year versus last year. So last year, I don't think the rules in place where you had to have the player for the entire year to get the comp pick.
Right.
This year you have to have them for the full year. So I think that would be the only thing that may hinder some of the deals that could have gone down. But having the idea of having Vinny Curry and Carr there who could potentially turn into thirds as comp picks as a result. Would have made probably dealing a little bit easier, but even in this new world, he was able to get it done for cheap enough. And, adds, like you said, fills a couple holes on the defense.
Right. I mean, I really like this team. I do think this team's going to do really well. Like I have them. I hold them in pretty high regard as far as like the AFC playoff teams or the ones making a push for playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that win over the Bengals was just kind of reestablishing himself in the race. So now it's kind of about hoping the Bengals don't falter another game, or well, the Bengals hope they don't falter. And if they do, then the Browns can take advantage of it.
Right. And again, they're right in the mix. Let me look here. So the Bengals still have the division, although they're also tied at 9-3 with the Colts for the second bye. I think Bengals would take it right now based off of where things are.
Right.
But that bye could be really important. My one thing with the Browns, and again, it's the same thing I've said about a couple of teams, and it may be a misunderstanding of the league on my part or otherwise, is I feel like the Browns are the perfect regular season team. They, not the perfect, I'd say the Bears are the perfect regular season team, but the Browns are the AFC's version of Goose's Bears. He's got points coming consistently at every position. And with the exception of maybe receiver where he's got it consolidated, he's not reliant on one or two performers. The issue I could see him having is I don't see many of these players as guys who are going to blow up for 40 in the playoffs. And against some of the top teams in the league, you may need to be hunting at the 300 range rather than the 200 range. And I don't know if this team's quite going to get there. Again, like you said, hey, I want to tank, but unfortunately I have to go for the playoffs and potentially win some money is not the worst position to be in. But I think he's still maybe a piece, like a big scoring piece or two short of making that final jump.
Right. I do agree with that. I think the trade to acquire Rashaan Evans
Mhm.
was you want to say one of those pieces. I mean, he's coming into his own this year.
Mhm.
Seems like every young linebacker in Tennessee is coming into their own.
Yeah.
Um, but if he would have gotten something else on that level, he certainly could have been a contender. I'm not saying that they're going to go in there and really give the Chargers a run for their money or anything. Um, but if he can pull out of the division, that's certainly in the realm of possibilities right now.
Yeah, not a bad thing in the least. All right, moving on. We've got the Steelers next.
I
They
don't think
are.
they made any significant moves at the trade deadline, did they?
Let's see. They are 7-5. Just taking a quick clear. No, they did not. Did not pick up anything. Did not send out anything. So, no moves whatsoever. So, I think we called them neutral when we were doing the podcast before, and
Yeah, I believe so.
yeah, they really stuck to that. So, hey, I appreciate you guys, agreeing with what I say, but you don't have to take it down to the T like these guys did. Damn. Um, but yeah, 7-5. Like I said, they are an outside shot at making this. Let's see, I don't think they have their first. I mean, this is one of those, and we had talked about this, so I won't rehash the entire thing. It's really tough for a team like this to make a move when you have a $31 million quarterback, 17.3 and a $20 million receiver who are kind of driving a lot of your points, and then a pretty well spread out defense. Like, it's tough to say, okay, let me find somebody who can give me enough cap space to give up a $20 million Julio.
Right.
And then if you do that, what do you do with Matt Ryan next year? Is it a hang on and find a bridge or what? So I understand him hanging on, but and I already made the joke about needing a running back in the tight end really competitive. But I mean, this offseason when teams have cap space, and I think you've done a couple of these off seasons with us, you can see kind of how people go money crazy in the offseason. Might be the time when cap space is abundant to finally get the right price for Matt, Julio, and begin the rebuild.
Yeah. I mean, did he win last week? That's one thing that was.
Let me check games. Yeah, he was playing the Ravens, so he won 179.2 to 166.76.
Okay, so I mean, going into the week, he was 6-5. I want to say I can understand the mentality of not moving, because you are already 6-5, and there's an off chance that you could like find yourself in the race. I would have liked to see him like break Julio Jones down into something else. Kind of a nod to if he kind of like flamed out the rest of the season, he had a little bit more going for him in the future because he has no picks next year other
Right.
than a Bears fourth. Um, I mean, with that said, I still somewhat agree with kind of just staying put because you are kind of stuck in a situation where you're probably going to be taking on like awful players to like fill up that Julio Jones cap, and they're probably going to add some type of value to the trade. So you're not going to necessarily get picks that you want back
Mhm.
for him or anything like that. I mean, I agree with staying put. It's one of those uncomfortable situations where you're kind of stuck in the middle.
No, and it's true. I mean, the 3-year deal on Julio, you can't even take that contract and either renegotiate or trade extend it down a little bit to try and make it even a little bit more palatable. So, um, yeah, it's one of those where it's probably just got to be a straight up. Like I said, there'll be a couple teams who are going shopping this offseason, so I think he gets it broken down then. But
I
good
think
on him waiting instead of having to, like you said, take on some bad contracts to make it work.
right. I think if we're like looking at what the possible trades were, I think making a trade where incidentally, one of the players that I moved and got back were probably like prime targets to get moved with Julio,
Mhm.
Cobb or Fitzgerald.
Exactly,
But
that's what I was just thinking.
any of the teams that were moving players like that around didn't necessarily have the picks to compensate.
Right. And the teams that have those picks, I mean, some had cap space, but others did not. So,
Right. It was a weird situation in some circumstances where like I had already sold off a lot of my picks, and I know a lot of teams that were similar to my win-loss record. They were also in that same situation. Maybe not all their picks, but like first and seconds were gone. So there wasn't anything tangible for like somebody that owns a Julio to get back in return.
Exactly. And then my level was more of the we're not quite sure if we're going to make it or not. So giving up our entire draft didn't make a lot of sense either. So I completely get the state of the league and the compensation.
Right.
All right, finishing up the AFC South with another team that didn't make any moves. Shame on you, Matt. You pull this shit again, I'm gonna have to show the donut video to this league too. But again, I like where this team is. I don't love it. I think he has some of the material to make some moves this offseason, but I don't think he has his first because he moved that in the Nuke deal. His defense is getting better. Not a massive hole, but frankly, as long as Jacoby Brissett can be there at like $1 million quarterback for him, that forgives all sort of sins. The
Right.
question just continues to be what happens to that $32 million albatross that is Andrew Luck.
Yeah. Even though the financial implications, I would have liked to see him just cut free of Andrew Luck, just to give him. I mean, he already has wiggle room. He has $9 million, but just he could have bought some of those like ridiculous expiring contracts if he really wanted to. Like if he wanted to make a push or anything like that.
Yeah, frankly, he
Um,
could have just by saying retired, cut the 32 million, and then moved a couple of the younger pieces from his team. Say, would the Steelers have done like a Devin White and Miles Boykin for Julio straight up?
right. So something like that, like, eh, but also you said the Ravens lost to the Steelers last week, correct?
Ravens lost the Steelers, yes, but
Okay, so they were 6-5 before last week. Yeah, I mean they were in a situation where they could have bought, but that Luck contract and I guess holding on hope to it is just like tying things up to really give him any like workaround. He lost Quan this week. Um,
yeah,
I mean I love his team in the sense of like young players, especially on defense. Like his linebacking core is ridiculous.
oh yeah.
He just needs to hope that he hits well on a second round pick because he doesn't have the first. Oh no, he doesn't have the first or second.
But we'll see. I think he still has pieces that will hold value going in the next offseason. I think Devonta is likely safe as a running back in Atlanta this offseason, but again, we'll see. Obviously, there's always the prospect of breaking up Nuke on his last year, stuff like that. But, he has
Yeah,
plenty of options.
like I said, I like the team. It seems to be like a lot of great undercosted players. So he's a team that could go into free agency next offseason and just like buy up anybody relevant and make a push.
Very true. Anyone who's planning on putting the franchise tag on a player probably should be careful of what Ravens are going to do.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the AFC South. The Colts are still sitting on top at 9-3. Texans at 8-4. Jags have dropped to 6-6, and the Titans continue their race to the bottom at 1-11. Starting with the Colts, who have been quite outspoken about their push to win the league and especially the AFC this year.
They're the team that's already penned a date with Los Angeles in the AFC Championship, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Chris is in a lot of leagues with a number of us, and yeah, it's nice to see him on the competing side of things this year, whereas he's been building the last couple of years in a couple of those leagues, not including this one. Last year, he was kind of surprised with Ridley and Moore really hitting for him as rookies,
Yeah.
but didn't really add anybody at all. I know that last week he added Jamal Williams for a first. So that was probably his deadline acquisition, but didn't do anything last week.
Yeah, I scoffed at that at that trade initially until I actually looked at Williams' stats this year, and his receiving touchdowns, like that's just absurdity.
Like that's the really weird thing. Have you watched a bunch of the Packers games or?
I've watched a lot of them, and it seems to be the same play over and over again, and he's just open all the time. Like that seems to be like one of their go-to plays, and like inside the 20. And I mean, even in the opposing team side of the field, and he's just destroying everybody. He's basically going unnoticed out of the backfield.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where I'm not sure if it's like a 49er running back situation where I'm not sure who to pick because I'm going to pick wrong, or if it's like way back when Jarvis Landry was a rookie, that was like, hey, you watch the Dolphins games and he's not doing anything, and then you look at the box score and somehow he ended up with 10 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown. It's like, when did this happen?
Well, the way I've been seeing it is like you see an overwhelmingly large amount of Aaron Jones in the backfield, and then like the 2 or 3 plays that Williams is in there, he touches the ball and he's doing something.
Right. Matt, welcome.
Howdy.
So we're talking about the Colts, about their lack of moves outside of the stuff we already talked about, and how Jamal Williams might actually be better than we thought, and be actually a pretty solid acquisition to kind of get him to the point where DJ is back and contributing.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Colts make such a horrible trade for Jordan Wilkins and then actually make a really good trade for Jamal Williams. So I think he's going to be good for him. He kind of reminds me of Giovanni Bernard in Cincinnati, where it's like he's not getting a ton of usage, but the usage he does have is really, really high quality usage.
Definitely.
Yeah. My face is incredibly numb, so if I look funny, that's why.
Well, we'll let you know if you start drooling on your face at some point, because that'll be hilarious.
Sounds good.
All right, moving on to the Texans at 8-4. Quick check on their deals at the deadline. Doesn't look like really they made much of any. Yeah, no deals to the deadline. They kind of did their shopping the week before. But again, looking at their division, they're still on the hunt, just one game back. They have 2 starting quarterbacks because Josh Allen and Ryan Tannehill apparently seems to be having his resurgence, living the Royce Freeman life. The super albatross contract that is Corey Davis, and then a solid defense. I feel like I keep saying this all the time. Like I haven't looked at many of these AFC teams thus far and said, "Wow, this is a great offense." But the defense isn't great. Like I feel like the AFC is really being carried and driven by their defense.
I wouldn't disagree for the most part. There's a couple teams that have solid offenses, but then just lack heavily at defense. But for the most part, it's a lot of teams. The good teams are mostly teams that have like a nice, solid, consistent IDP, and then you've got guys like Bengals where it's an IDP plus Christian McCaffrey. That's his entire offense is Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, we talked about him. I think despite some of Chris's hopes, this may be the Browns division right now, not the Bengals division, but we shall see where that ends up.
Yeah, talking about the Texans, like I like their offense. They have a lot of great options, a lot of flyers at tight end, so somebody's bound to get you like between 6 and 10 points every week. Like you said, the defense just isn't anything that you really want or want to be like throwing out there in the postseason or in a race to the postseason. He kind of whiffed on a first for Lee over the offseason. So like that was one linebacker that he had high hopes for and just did not get any production out of him.
No, that's a fair point. But again, it's been kind of production by group at this point rather than by singular point. But yeah, I know Darren Lee, when he got traded to the Chiefs, everyone thought he was going to be, right next to Hitchens and that guy, but hasn't been. Roquan has been kind of disappointing. So, but then you get Jonathan Allen, who, hey, he's the front guy in a 3-4, but somehow has almost 100 points at the end. So, sometimes you get stuff you don't expect from places you don't expect.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, just the team's not super inspiring. They're not bad. It'd be a good team if every team was built like this, but they're not. I think he fights his way into a wild card spot, though, hopefully.
Yeah. Maybe Corey Davis will actually do something.
Doubtful, but one can hope.
What's that meme where it's the stick figure guy basically pointing at somebody saying, do something? That's kind of what all Corey Davis owners, myself included, are hoping at this point.
Well, this league was the only share that I had him, and I proudly sold him off in the offseason, and I'm glad to be away from that.
Very nice. All right, so moving on to the Jags. Got another team that didn't do anything at the deadline. I know that a couple of us were lamenting that people weren't being active really at the deadline here. I don't know if it was one of those where owners didn't realize that this deadline was before some others. But here we are. Again, we kind of figured this team was not going to – like it could have maybe made a push, but it would have required some kind of ownership to step in because, again, to remind folks – they're not scoring at tight end because they have 2 players on injured reserve there. So maybe the commission should take a look at this as you must have a player scoring it or startable at each position because they don't and have it the entire season. So, hey, guys. But, not really an owner keeping track of this or anything. So, not surprised the move was made.
Is 152 days, 6 hours, and now 8 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had trade offers out to them from week 1 to when the trade deadline expired. So, and they haven't responded to any of them. I mean, they have Carson Wentz at $31 million and Joey Bosa. That's the start of a team. But nothing for this season.
Yeah, so this is probably another team that's going to need to be replaced this offseason. So either way, won't spend much more time on them. Last but not least, in the South is the Tennessee Titans, who made a small deal. I don't know if you guys saw it. Sold off a couple of pieces for some picks. Basically, they had given up Dalvin Cook, Tyreek Hill, Earl Thomas, and Josh Gordon in 2 separate deals and got back a bunch of expiring contracts, the Bears 2020 third-round pick, and then Steelers first, the Ravens first, the Lions first, the Redskins second, the Lions second next year. So 3 first, 2 second, and a third, and expirings for Josh Gordon, Dalvin Cook, Tyreek Hill, and Earl Thomas. So even though they don't have their first next year, they seem to be well on their way towards acquiring some capital to rebuilding next year.
That I thought that was I think that could have been a good trade if it wasn't including Dalvin Cook. Because Dalvin Cook is worth more than 3 late firsts in this league, and you have to assume that one of those picks he's assuming he could even talk himself into thinking the Redskins second is worth Tyreek, but it's just like
So that's the issue. These aren't late firsts. The Steelers are probably not making the playoffs. The Ravens are not making the playoffs.
Right.
The Lions might make the playoffs.
They're not early.
Right, they're not top 10, but they're probably in the 15 to 20 range, if not better. And then the Redskins' second is going to be top 35.
Yeah, I think it was a good trade for you. I just think Titans, if he really wanted to, he could have gotten more for Cook. But
that would have required probably a little bit more selling, a little bit more activity, and
you would have had to try.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that was probably like as an accumulation, that was probably the best that they were gonna get.
Yeah.
Without like an extreme amount of legwork trying to get the like multiple trades done.
Mhm.
I mean they have picks, they can build towards the future.
And that's the thing. Like, this is not a team that, at least from my perspective, should be aiming for a top 5 pick, although a top 5 pick wouldn't hurt them. They've got a quarterback. Miles Sanders has been performing well, especially for this league format. Campbell's had a rough rookie season, but Keyshawn Johnson's been a nice surprise. Disley getting hurt sucks, but could be useful down the line. So basically, and then Whitney Merciless, although he is an expiring, should get him a comp pick. But basically, between the picks he's pulled together here, plus what should be a pretty strong set of cap space, probably in the $50 to $60 million range next offseason, can get him back on the right track here in a hurry.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I think he needed to do more at the deadline just because I'm quickly looking over his roster. He's got a bunch of dudes that probably should have gotten moved. Like Whitney should have gotten moved. Ogletree, he should have tried to move.
Oh, there were lots of offers out for Whitney.
Yeah. I made a couple. I know I made a couple on Whitney. I made a couple on Jenkins. I didn't hear anything back at all. Which is it's like it's kind of odd that he made the trade that he made with you, but like also wasn't willing to do the legwork to do any other trades because he could have walked away with a large haul of picks besides just what he got from you if he actually wanted to put in 20 minutes work.
Well, that was the thing. Like, I literally sent that to him while we were recording, and then he accepted it at like 12:05 when another trade I had out there got accepted at 12:06. So, I was as surprised as anybody that went through.
It's just odd. He's an odd dude. I think he's trying to go the same way the Chiefs went, except he missed on all of his auction picks.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree. There were like smaller deals that I saw that just should have been done. I mean, like he could have capitalized on Kiki QT's value right now just with Fuller's injury. He probably could have gotten a higher end pick than what he's actually going to produce as far as numbers wise.
I mean, I have or had that third. I don't know if I still have it or not. I offered that straight up for Whitney, which that in itself is a higher pick than what he would have gotten as a comp pick. And in like my mind, like that, like if I was on his end, that's just an easy accept.
I agree.
He's moving it for something else because you're not going to hold Whitney and take a pick that is at best, one pick worse, assuming Bengals win or not Bengals, Texans somehow wins next year.
Right.
Which right now that'd be what pick be in the early 20s.
It would be drastically ahead of the comp pick that they're going to get.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think a lot of what we've had happen last week may start shifting some owners' mindsets about expiring contracts and what they can get from and stuff like that, comp picks versus otherwise. So,
well, my thing was like everything that he got back from you, he could have easily turned into at worst a 4th or a 5th instead of it just going to free agency and not getting anything.
That dude could have walked away with like a dozen picks in the next 2 drafts.
Right.
But instead, he just sat there and did nothing. And it's just weird. Like, I think one of the biggest issues in this league as a whole is that we have a lot of owners that are competent and active, and then we have basically just as many owners that either don't give a shit or don't want to put in the effort.
Right.
I agree. One of the problems is like a lot of people just assume that a 4th and a 5th round pick is worth literally nothing. and they don't want those picks in return for their like 1-year players. They don't realize that they're just not going to get anything in return, and I mean that's their choice.
Nope. Makes
So
sense.
I can't really like make sense of it. I just maybe they intend on trying to rebuy these guys next offseason.
It is funny to see the like drastic difference in the bad teams that are like actively intelligent owners and the bad teams that are just like existing. Because Falcons has how many firsts?
Right.
And, like, Redskins has a new owner, so he's like kind of stuck there. But like Seahawks,
Redskins got stuck into a situation where they were going to try to tank and then got called out halfway through the offseason. And then they were like, I'm going to start buying things, and kind of just got stuck in that middle of like giving up some assets for like production, but just enough to where they couldn't secure like the first pick in the draft.
well, he also came in without his first, right?
I believe so.
Pretty sure Falcons has Redskins first for some reason. From the previous Redskins owner.
Okay. I wasn't sure who the owner was when that pick got traded.
Yeah. But then you have like Seahawks, who traded away all of his good players for nothing. And it's just like it's odd because like there's such a drastic difference between, like, I'm pretty sure Browns probably has more draft capital than some of these 1-11 teams, just because he's managed his team better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, it's a have and have not, but it's not an accident when you're a have not. All right, moving on to the AFC East. Last week we had the showdown between the Jets and the Bills, the Pats and the Dolphins. Jets and Bills were who was going to be leading the division. Pats and Dolphins for who was going to be in the driver's seat for a top 3 pick. The Jets won and the Pats won. So here we are the week after. Jets, we talked about a little bit their big deals during the deadline pod of picking up Marcus Golden and turning the Panthers quarterback situation into Russell Wilson and Ryan Fitzpatrick. So we'll get RJ's thoughts on that, but I don't think Matt and I need to rehash that. I guess now it's just a matter of now that they kind of have control of the division, where do we think that this team goes from there? So RJ, any other thoughts on kind of the deadline moves or otherwise on this team?
I mean, I like the quarterback move. Anytime you can just get Russell Wilson, regardless of like how much, like, well, Cam Newton's ridiculously overpriced anyway. So yeah, good to have 2 quarterbacks. One's Russell Wilson. I mean, I'm not impressed by a Panthers, accumulation of quarterbacks. The Golden trade, good on his part. Don't understand why the Niners did it.
Yep. So you and Matt are on the same page there. And I just haven't looked close enough at what Golden's been doing this year to see if this is a sustainable position for him going forward.
I'm sure it's probably more sustainable than Jerick McKinnon ever playing for the 49ers.
Yep. That's my one concern with the trade is you basically gave up a guy that hasn't seen the field in 2 years, or got a guy.
Yeah. Well, what's wrong with that?
I mean, if it's Josh Gordon, sure, maybe, but other than that, I don't think I'm going to bet on any other player that's been injured that much.
Yeah, I mean, even if Jerick McKinnon was healthy tomorrow, what running back gets displaced in San Francisco for Jerick McKinnon?
Oh, it'll happen eventually. They're all made of glass.
Well, who is it though? Right now, it's not Tevin. It's not Brady.
Oh, no. Tevin looks amazing, but you're basically just hoping that the inevitable happens to all of them at the same time.
Yeah, if Jerick McKinnon was healthy today, and the Niners played, and let's say he was ready to play on Monday night, he fills in for Raheem Mostert's position at absolute best, right?
Right. So he gets you 1 tackle on a kickoff.
Yeah, you're getting 3 or 4 touches a game. and you traded a guy that had how many points already on the season?
It was 100 plus when the trade was
100
already.
points right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. All right. Moving over to another one of the buyers from the AFC East, the Bills, made a big deal of trying to fill a couple of holes before the deadline with, I think, their 2 seconds. One of the deals that went down before our stuff last week, so I'm not going to cover those. I will touch on quickly the deal they made of Derek Carrier and their first for Shaq Thompson and Ben Watson. I think we may have touched on this quickly last week, Matt, about really Ben Watson and what Shaq Thompson really going to give you, and was he worth that late first? I have to shake my head a little bit because I was talking linebackers with the Bills, and I think I had offered a better one than Thompson that didn't get accepted. So is what it is. But any final thoughts or additional thoughts on the Bills here, Matt?
No, I just still think that trade was bad for Falcons. I think Shaq Thompson was probably worth more than what he was valuing him as.
Really?
Yeah, no, well, part of it's also I'm concerned about Falcons actually hitting on that pick.
Okay.
And I feel like Shaq Thompson's one of those guys where, the first in itself is more valuable, but you know what you have right there with Shaq Thompson. And realistically, what are the odds of you drafting, let's say Bills make the playoffs and it's going to be a mid-late 20th round, or 20th round, but 20th pick in the first round. The odds of you hitting on a linebacker that's going to score you that much is probably not that high. Just looking at it right now, if you took in the 20s, I don't think we actually took any linebackers in this league. We didn't.
Devin Bush in the 20s last year. I took Devin Bush in the 20s last year.
In the last year? See, that you're good. Well, that was at 20. So, if you're assuming it's the worst pick for playoff teams, then yeah, you have a chance at a Devin Bush. But you also have a chance of going after an Ed Oliver and you get 50 points out of him. Or an Andy Bell and you get 31. I don't think that that pick can be anything. It can even be a Shaq Thompson.
Well, my only thing is, and this may be an evaluation of some linebackers as a whole, but I have an issue with confidence in a Shaq Thompson, a Denzel Perryman, who else? Bud Dupree, Devondre Campbell. All of them are nearing the end of their rookie deals, and none of the teams are confident enough to opt into that 5th year leading into that contract year. Mm-hmm. So, they know what they have, and they're not extremely confident in it.
Well,
so,
Shaq Thompson.
Shaq Thompson
I'll say the Shaq Thompson side. Shaq Thompson was drafted as the heir apparent to Luke Kuechly because he had 2 major concussions in the previous couple of years, and if it's a third, he's gone. So let's see. Hey, here's the heir apparent to Luke Kuechly because odds are he's going to get a 3rd major concussion and be gone. And shockingly, Luke Kuechly's comeback has not been concussed and has been at the peak of his powers. So I agree with what you're saying. The fact that they haven't really turned things over to him yet is a problem. But, it's one of those where you make a plan for something and then you don't actually have to execute on that plan. What do you expect the team to do? Hey, we've got one of the best middle linebackers in the league, but let's turn it over to the new guy because we planned this even though the current guy's better.
Well, I'm just saying I think getting the first round and maybe a re-roll and potentially finding another one of those players is better than somebody who's their role has, I don't want to say pass them by because he's no slouch at linebacker by any means, but he isn't the focal point of that defense.
Right.
That's fair. I just like the bird in the hand type thing, right?
That's fair. I think if you're a winning team, and if you have a winning record, I think you take the linebacker. If you're the team with the losing record, I think you take the pick.
Yeah,
I think it's really close.
that confuses me for Falcons because his team isn't really that bad. And he's going to have so many early picks coming in where, like, realistically, if he even hits on half of them, he's going to have a bunch of new starters on that team. So he should be competing with a weak Panthers team, a relatively weak Saints team, and a non-existent Buccaneers team for that NFC South.
Right. In the scenario of like the Falcons not getting rid of that linebacker just in hopes of like shattering somebody else's dreams, I agree with that. I agree with just holding on to the linebacker, but I can't scoff at him for, turning that into another re-roll when he has so many of them coming next year.
I also think Falcons is just being a chicken shit right now. So
we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, as much as we can.
Anyways, moving on. Talking about a team that won that probably didn't want to, but here we are anyway with the Patriots. 3 and is it 9 now?
Yep, 3 and 9.
Take a quick look at moves that he made. Let's see. Picked up my third, the Lions third, Lamar Miller, and the Jets second. In the process, gave up Jerick McKinnon, Cameron Wake. No, I'm sorry, wrong person. Patriots. There we go. Malcolm Butler, the Steelers third, and Darren Fells. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So basically, after I took on Lamar Miller for free from Matt because I didn't think I was going to have any shot at the postseason, after the Titans move, I needed to dump Lamar Miller. So Patriots was the benefit of that. So again, looks like with the win, with 3 wins, they're probably not going to be a top 5 pick, but they should still stay in the top 10. That said, what else is there to say about this team?
They turned a 3rd-round pick into a 2nd-round pick.
Yeah.
Right?
And got Lamar Miller.
Lamar Miller.
Yeah. Which, I mean,
it's a reasonable move.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that Malcolm Butler put up this amount of points. I kind of thought the Titans only had one cornerback just on their roster.
Since he sucks, people target him a lot, which means he gets a lot of targets.
No.
Why do you think I keep getting Janoris Jenkins on my team?
I'm just saying when you look at Logan Ryan's point total, you'd assume that he's the only person in the secondary.
Yeah, that's fair.
That makes sense. But yeah, but he's now on IR, so of all the moves I made this last week, if one was going to end up on IR, I think I'd prefer it to be Malcolm Butler. But regardless, all right. Last but not least, we've got the Dolphins. They
exist.
A small move with RJ actually giving up Marvin Hall and Samson Ekubam for Ryan Connolly and the Texans 4th. So nothing earth-shattering, but as the Eagles put together their defense by association rather than more than one major ad, makes some good sense. But we'll see where this team ends up, especially with Finley making his debut next week. I'm surprised he couldn't offload Ingram at all, but otherwise probably was going to stand pat the rest of this roster.
He seemed not overly interested. I never really got any responses back from him, so I don't know how your experience with him, RJ, was.
I essentially offered to turn both of my running backs into his whole offense, and he declined it.
Okay. Yeah, I never even got like a decline or anything, so I wasn't sure if he was just kind of like coasting through the trade deadline. Like, he's got guys there. Like, if there was any teams that were winning that had cap space, like, he could probably have turned AJ into something reasonable. I'm honestly surprised he didn't try and trade Preston Williams earlier in the year because, yeah, he's on a 2-year deal, but, like, what is he going to just extend him?
So my thought process is kind of with the same on what was it when we talked about the AFC North.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like all of the possible moves that he could have made were made like the contending teams that could have like used these players like a Preston Williams didn't have enough picks or reasonable picks to like get anything away from him. I think he wanted something more than like a third or a fourth or a fifth.
That's kind of reasonable.
I
I
would
do
have given
think
a second for him.
What was that, Mike?
I would have given a second for him.
Yeah. I just think like there's a break point. Like, yeah, you may not be getting what you think you want or like what you do want, but like there's only so many things that people can offer.
Right.
I ran around with my first round pick and all my picks for next year earlier in the season, just trying to get some IDP help. And people were acting like every single IDP player they had, whether it was 1 year or like 3 years or whatever, was worth their weight in gold, which is why I ended up with Everson Griffin.
Yeah, I have Danny Trevathan because of that exact same reason. Where I could have just held on to the first and tried to get something else, but I'm kind of glad I got what I did, just because there weren't any significant defensive players traded.
Mm-hmm.
So here's gonna be the interesting thing about the Dolphins next year. So obviously they'll get Ben back. They're gonna have a good amount of cap space. If I'm counting this right, they've got 36 players right now. They're gonna lose Reggie White, Tanner Hudson, a punter, Kelvin Smith, and a corner.
Yeah, the only thing they're losing of value is a corner.
Yeah, they're really not losing anything. So they didn't really need to make a move because, oh God, someone's going to walk out the door. Obviously, there's a potential to sell, which wouldn't have been bad, especially with a contract like AJ's. But basically, this team's core is there. The question is, can you go from a 1-10 team or 1-11 team to a playoff team with just 9 players, including one of those having to be a punter? Again, I think that's a conversation for another pod, but it's one of those where I think they didn't have to make a move, but they probably should have made one.
Yeah, his team's in a very similar position to mine 2 years ago, except 2 years ago, all of my good players were just really young. And in his case, all of his good players are old as shit.
Yeah. I think in this situation, like if I was him, I wouldn't be too distraught. Like from the outside looking in, I'm kind of wondering how his record got to be that point with the assets on offense. But like knowing that this is a lost season for him, I wouldn't be too distraught. Like, and I wouldn't be forcing any moves. Like you still have your first, you're still gonna get a high pick. Let's hope Ben decides to play another year, which is looking like the case. Everybody else, they're not going to fade into obscurity by next year. So you just try to accumulate more stuff in the offseason.
Yeah, I'll be happy to trade him Mason Rudolph for AJ Green.
I mean, I know he's going to be up against it with contract years. Like he can make his first, and that's about it. When the free agents drop off, what does he get? 4 more years?
So I mean, he'll get 36 more years because
right. But he's not going to be able to go out and just accumulate players in free agency in mass. Like he still has to be pretty conscious of what he's picking up.
Right. He'll be at about 60 years when he does his thing. So
right. Which I found out last off season, that sounds like you can make some things work, but
after you make your picks, then you've got nothing.
You give the wrong player a 3-year deal, and maybe another person a 4-year deal, and you're up against the contract years before the beginning of the season. Then you have to make unfavorable moves.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the AFC West. First off, congrats, Matt, for winning your division yet again.
Thank you,
I believe the win this week clinches the AFC West for the Chargers, and you are now 2 games ahead of both the Colts and the Bengals. I don't know if you've officially clinched. You haven't officially clinched a bye yet, but you're damn close.
I think I need to win. I either win against Bengals and I clinch a bye, or I need to win 2 games.
I don't know how that would help you clinch the bye since the Browns are winning the AFC North, but
well, I have wins against both of them. Well, I'd have wins against both of them. I beat the Browns,
I know
So
there's
that would
only
also
one
be-
team who's had the audacity to take you
Yeah,
down.
only one team has decided they need to ruin a perfect season on me.
You're welcome.
I mean, I don't know how I feel about this team. Like, I look at their most recent pickup, and they pick up like a defensive end that's out of position. I'm
Useless
just wondering,
defensive
like, what the hell's going on. But no, on a more serious note, like, it's the contender coming out of the AFC.
Yeah, obviously. So we don't really talk much about that. Let me just see if there are any trades that they made. Let's see.
I mean, I feel like
added Randall Cobb, Demetrius Harris, Damian Williams, and Damian Wilson. What did you give up for that?
Walker and Anyosar, that third
Owasu.
Owasu, whatever his name is. He doesn't matter. He's not on my team anymore. He's a bum.
No, he went to irrelevancy really quick.
I mean, he got
Did he do
injured.
something last week? I feel like he did something in the Pats game.
He put up really good stats, but his snap count was even decreasing in that Patriots game. Like, he was sub 40% or something like that. And
Gotcha.
yeah,
He had a sack and a forced fumble, but he did have 6 tackles.
Well, hey, you got rid of Walker for an expiring contract of the same size, so that in and of itself is
Yeah. I turned Walker into a player that actually plays football still, which was really nice.
yeah. I think the getting Randall Cobb is great because it kind of like that just shores up your wide receiver 3, right?
Yeah.
Wide receiver 4. I mean, you have
Well, it just makes
Sanu
my
also,
offense hopefully more consistent.
right? Which, I mean, you have a running back playing receiver basically in Eckler, so yeah, you're just gonna kill everybody with the PPR points.
And the IRL Eagles have decided that they have realized that Jordan Howard is a good football player and should get a lot of snaps.
I mean, I don't know why people were so low on him. Like, why like Chicago got rid of him for peanuts when he was like what 8th in rushing the year prior.
Yeah, all of his stats were basically like equivalent to Ezekiel's. And then Matt Nagy came in and was like, I want my own guy. And then now we see that the offense is absolute dog shit.
No. So, in the final mistake I made with Antonio Brown, I believe there was a point where you had offered me, I believe it was Jordan Howard for Antonio Brown straight up, and I told you to pound sand. So
Possibly.
As of today, Jordan Howard is employed and Antonio Brown isn't.
Right. So the obvious joke that we've made many times in the group me is whoever acquires Antonio Brown takes on the curse of Antonio Brown, and the offer keeps getting worse for Antonio Brown. So that I think was the final straw of the curse sticking with me on this one.
You know what's bad? When I traded OJ Howard, Juju Smith-Schuster for Antonio Brown at the beginning of last year, and I somehow have the best trade involving Antonio Brown that's occurred in this league. Like, I came out the best for it, I think, so far out of all the Antonio Brown trades.
Yeah, there's nothing good about that.
That guy just has a gift on burning real life NFL teams and fantasy teams.
Yeah. He won me money last year, so I'll take that. But dude's a bum. Actually, I think I've won both my Antonio Brown trades because I traded him for effectively cap space to the Bengals.
Second. All right. Let's see. All right, moving on to the Chiefs, the team that took on your favorite tight end and others. So I think they've clearly packed it in this year. They could be in the race, but I think they're choosing not to be with some of the moves to kind of go at it next year, which is funny because you do something like that and maybe you move some pieces. But once again, looking at them, these aren't pieces that could easily be moved. Picking up Delaney Walker in the deal that he did with the Chargers, $15 million on Carlos Hyde. One more year of having all of the cap space and spending it on one-year players seems to be in the Chiefs' future. quick look at the trades. It was a deal with the Bears to pick up Woodyard and Inman, who was, of course, on IR. And in return, they gave him Brandon Copeland. And then the deal with the Chargers. Also, they were an enabler for the Eagles, giving up Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Jones, Brendan Scarlett, and Chuck Clark. Some really big contracts. And in return, took back Cobb, Klein, Neiman, and Joseph. And, of course, Cobb got flipped to the Chargers. So I probably could consolidate this a little bit, but I did not. Either way, looks like they've tried to acquire a good bit of expiring money to do what they did again next year.
Yep. I know his big thing with me was he was looking for guys that were on long-term contracts that were reasonably likely to score well in IDP next year, that were inexpensive. Which is why, like, whatever Patrick, loser linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens, last name is, and Tavarius Moore were included because Moore is kind of being groomed to take over one of the safety spots in San Francisco, which is odd because he's kind of got that Kareem Jackson thing going where he's more of a safety, but he's lined up at cornerback in MFL. So,
Yep, I basically did the same thing with me. I mean, the real assets that he picked up were Klein and Neiman. Klein is, an aging asset, but still a productive linebacker at a reasonable price. Neiman, being groomed for a role, had 2 weeks at 80+% snaps, and then that quickly deteriorated as everybody got healthy. But a nod to the future.
Yep. And he's an IRL Chiefs fan, so I'm sure he understands that better than any of us.
Okay. And I actually say that Copeland, like, he didn't get much back for it, but like it was somebody he picked up off of free agency. So like anytime you can get anything for it, I think it's a great flip.
If you can pick somebody up and turn them into something, that's always good.
Right.
Because you can't keep guys you sign in free agency during the season. So if you get something that you can stick to your roster, that's always good.
Words to live by. All right, moving down to the rebuilding part of the West, 4-8 Raiders. Quick look at any moves they made. And nope. So no deals, which, again, surprising considering the expiring Teddy Bridgewater and Chase Daniel, which I can't. Oh, never mind. The Raiders don't actually check anyway. So why are we talking about them? Any other thoughts on the Raiders because they don't care enough to actually check in?
No.
They're building their team the right way. They just should make more trades to accumulate more like shots at picking up rookies.
Yeah, he's
They're building
building
the team the right way if they didn't take a $63 million salary cap floor penalty.
He also has an IR violation, Jeremy, if you're listening to this. I messaged Goose, but he ignored me.
Yeah, Jay Sternberger's healthy.
But I mean, he's building his team the right way if he had twice as many draft picks.
Right.
But he's not making the moves to get those draft picks.
I mean, in my mind, like, he has the right idea, but ideally Lorenzo Carter and Darius Leonard probably would have been flipped for, like, a first and something plus just to, like, get another pick in there. Hunter would have been gone 1,000%, like at the trade deadline.
Oh, yeah. I kicked the tires on that one, too.
Yep. It's weird. Like, he's going to get stuck in the position where he's never good enough to actually compete, and he's going to have to be flipping the guys that he drafted 2 years before into picks to pick guys so that he can replace the guys that he'll have to trade the next year because he's never going to actually have enough talent to be at the top end of things.
Right. Which if you're gonna get stuck in that vicious cycle, why not flip them while they're in their first or second year when they're at their peak of value?
Yeah.
It's so nice to have two people to talk to who actually understand how this is supposed to work on here. I just want to say that.
I mean, the only thing I see is like Justin Reed should have been flipped for like a late first rounder. He shouldn't even be on this team.
Yeah.
Like, because I know like a contending team or somebody that's like a Texans fan would have paid that.
What could have been?
Hunter was one of the guys that I offered all of my picks for and got nothing.
All right, well, that takes care of the AFC for us. We'll move over to the NFC here in a second. We had a couple mentions of this on GroupMe, so I figure we should probably do this before we jump into this division, since it does impact a couple of teams here. I just wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents at what happened last week. I'm not going to make a big deal out of this. I'm not going to continue to beat the drum on this. I think it was just something that I know the old Panthers team was looking to say something about this, but they got frustrated to the point of Mike dropping and leaving the league. But I think it's an important point, and it's something that I don't think the commissioners have kind of connected the dots on yet. So I just kind of wanted to throw a couple words at it and, let my opinion be known and then just kind of move on from there. So what he was kind of trying to connect the dots with was, I don't know if folks remember before rollover for the 2018 league into the 2019 league, but the old Panthers and I both had a situation where we had I had Solomon Thomas, he had Quan Alexander on either taxi squad or IR, and because of the soft cap rules, we couldn't activate them directly to our roster, but because of soft cap, we could go over the cap if we traded players. So we did trade for and trade back of those players, which was completely legal under the old rules to get them onto our active roster. Obviously, because we're trading a player and then trading right back for them, the league blew up because 99% of the time there's collusion involved in that, and it's not a good thing. The commissioners jumped in rapidly, did a great job, said, look, this isn't written down in the rules outside of maybe trading cap space, even though our cap number went up. So trying to say that we traded cap space in this and then our cap number went up kind of doesn't make sense to me. Basically said you violated the spirit of the rule here and then reversed it. So why am I bringing this up? What happened last week with the the practice squad stuff. So why do we have practice squad theft? It's to prevent players from hiding points on practice squad. You want to do it? Fine. Someone's going to try and steal them and either force you to activate them or lose the player. We also have the protection of if a claim comes in within 24 hours of the player starting their game, the clock stops and restarts after the game. Now, this opened up a loophole that allowed someone to violate the spirit of why we have practice squad theft, which is hiding points. You shouldn't be able to hide points in practice squad. That's why we have the theft, or we wouldn't have theft in the first place. So because of the protection we had in place, it opened up a loophole which violated the spirit of it, and Falcons was able to hide points and improve his picks in the process. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because in one case, the commissioners intervened to say, hey, you violated the spirit of the rule. We're not going to allow it. In another case, it's clear the spirit of the rule was violated, and the response that I've seen thus far, and if there's been others, I apologize, has been wait till the offseason. We've made our decision. We're not intervening on this. And the only other difference I can come up with is Falcons asked first. Whereas I did, Falcons asked, hey, I'm going to violate the spirit of the rule. Am I okay with it? So that's my big issue about it. It's both situations violate the spirit. One situation, the commissioners intervened. The other situation, the commissioners didn't. Now, let me caveat this. I get it's a highly complex league. I don't want to, I'm not going to mic drop the league or leave the league because of this, but I think that's why Panthers got wildly upset about it. That's why I was annoyed by it, beyond the fact that I own the Buccaneers first-round pick, and the fact that, Jeremy's response was, these things are completely unrelated, only served to pour gasoline on that fire.
Panthers got mad because the same thing's happening in another 32-team league, and he's pissed about it. And they were complaining in that the same evening, and it kind of just culminated in him getting furious and leaving one of the leagues, the one that he wasn't an established contender in.
Yeah, I understand. So that's my 2 cents on it. So that's why the Panthers and I have tried to connect the two, because both situations, the spirit was violated, not the letter of the bylaws. In one case, the commissioners intervened. In the other, they didn't. So, but that's that. But anyways, if the decision's been made and the Falcons aren't going to be forced to take their points for last week because they violated the spirit of the bylaws, then fine. We'll move on. We'll talk about it this offseason. But I wanted to make sure that got out there as to why the conversation was happening, why the point was getting made, and why kind of we were dumbfounded as to folks not really connecting the dots there.
I also want to raise the idea of what he did in the actual like dropping a game to a specific opponent thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I play the NFC North this year. Obviously, Goose is a strong team. The Bears are a strong team. What prevents me from when I play let's say we go back to week 8, it's prior to week 8, what prevents me from purposefully losing to the Packers the same way that the Falcons purposefully lost to the Buccaneers, in trying to give one team an edge in wins over another team? When in the Falcons' case, it was to give them the edge to make that pick worse, to make their own picks, the picks they own, better. When in my case, it'd be to make a team better and win more, to get them in the playoffs over another team. Both of those are effectively, in my view, Bush League and against the entire spirit of what we're doing in this league and trying to be competitive and not trying to be squirrely and ratty with shit. Like I don't want to see Goose out of the playoffs because I pick and choose which teams to lose to. I'd love to see Goose out of the playoffs because I whoop his ass in week 11. That's what I'd want to see in what was like managing like that type of thing. Like it's not my place to like try. Like there's the amount of uproar that something like that should cause, I feel like wasn't enough for what the Falcons did, only because there's no playoff implications. Like the Falcons losing to the Buccaneers in this league mean nothing to the teams that care right now. The teams that don't care are the teams that are affected by that because it's their pick order being messed with because a guy owns a pick and decided he was going to do something that isn't expressly written against the rules and the bylaws, which is what Jeremy said. It's not that he didn't say it was good or okay. He said it wasn't against the rules, which in itself says this is something that should be against the rules and you shouldn't be doing this. And the fact that Brett, who's the Falcons owner, openly admitted and understands that like he's being an asshole by doing this, and it's like a totally scumbag move. Like that to me,
that's my only issue with it.
Like it just makes it worse. Like you realize you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, but you're so caught up in yourself to get one pick a little bit higher. Like I legitimately told him, I hope he misses on every single pick because of this. Because like this is just like it's Bush League. Like this is it's not. Like another guy in one of the group chats we're in was being like making fun of the whole my integrity, like they're ruining the integrity of the league. But it's like no, we're all grown men in this league, and we should be acting as such and not trying to do some like back alley shenanigans stuff to try and better a pick. Like it just.
Well, I mean, I think that involves the integrity of the league.
Yeah. But there's technically no rule that says you're going, like you can't go against the integrity of the league. Like it's an unspoken one in pretty much every fantasy league I'm in because we're adults and we don't want to be acting like children and trying to backstab people for no reason. Like there's
just
the
hold
ego
yourself
man.
to a higher standard.
Yeah, like just don't be a douchebag. Golden rule: don't be a douchebag. But Falcons decided he wanted to be a douchebag and try and play around the rules and stuff. So
yeah. So again, I wanted to get out there because again, in chat there's been some questions about when are we going to get to that part of the conversation. So I didn't want to force people to listen to the NFC who weren't interested in it, but at the same time, it does impact a good bit of the NFC race and a couple of sort of downstream pieces of it. So it seemed like the right time to address it.
One quick thing, though, and I would like to ask this, Jeremy and Goose, if they listen to this, and I'll be reaching out to both of them. So is this confirmed? Like, we can just taxi people and not have any sort of, like, if I do the exact same thing that Falcons did this weekend to throw my game against the Lions, there's no issue with that at all.
Until the end of the season, I'm assuming that's the case.
There's no repercussions. I want confirmation from the commissions, and I'll ask them this then.
Well, I mean, I think you should be wording it as the other teams in the league can make a choice on how they want to affect playoff standings.
Yeah, like that's basically, I'm saying, like, I can throw a game against the Lions this week and try my best to win against Bears the following week. And that would be effectively trying to game the playoff standings.
Yes, to hinder one of the guys that has given me a loss already this season. Yes, yes, you can do that.
Like I have the ability.
I think we've officially moved into what helps RJ the most territory.
It's like that is the position that we are now in the league. Where like I have the power to try and game the NFC playoff standings because I can.
Right. That was my biggest issue with it is you start you set a precedent.
Yeah,
and
that's
now
that's the door that is open now.
Right. And don't get me wrong, we can close that door in the off season, but we don't have unless something was done right then and there, we can't change it this season. So now we've allowed teams that aren't in the race to effectively cast their vote on who they want in the postseason and dictate that.
And you can make the
to an
argument,
extent.
Matt, you're still in the race for a bye, but I'm ahead enough to where I have the head-to-head over both of those teams. I think. Did I play the Colts? I did play the Colts. I have the head-to-head over all three of the teams if I beat the Bengals.
Right.
So I can drop 2 games, just lose 2 games, and at worst I tie them.
Well, I play the Bills and the Jets for the next 2 games. So you're telling me that I can dictate who I want to win out of those next 2. I could just taxi Barkley because that's still an option and let the Jets win and gain ground on the Bills or no.
You could seal the Jets almost into a playoff spot if you just threw the game against them and then tried to win against the Bills. Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to do that because the race in my division is close enough as it is. But, that's just one of the things that could potentially have happened.
Yep. And could still happen this weekend with the Chargers-Lions game. Just saying, commissions.
All right. Back to the deadline conversation here. Appreciate you guys' thoughts on that as well. Obviously, that's an important thing that happened this past week. So, we'll see where things go there.
I'd imagine it will get fixed, and I have faith in the commissioners that it will.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those weird things. I don't want to say that because something was done in the past and they did something about it, that should be involved in the discussion. But they've already set precedent in the past that they would change something that's detrimental for the league. So, it's more about perception. How detrimental do you think this is for the league?
Well, there's also the last offseason, they made a really big deal about closing the loopholes on the bylaws. That, hey, the thing that we really wanted to make sure they really want to make sure they took care of was closing all of the loopholes.
Right.
We're not going to get 100% of them, but if the goal is to close a loophole and then someone brings one to your attention and the next season and it's okay.
Right. That was always my assumption. They made such an effort to close to shore up all the gray areas that if one were to arise, then, out of respect for the league, somebody wouldn't exploit that. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Yeah. I mean, I think I trust Goose and Jeremy enough moving forward to where I don't think a rule being written into the bylaws saying if a loophole is found that would intervene or affect the outcome of a game directly in a gaming or lacking of I don't even know what the exact wording would be, but basically, like, to avoid something like this in any form, just like give Goose and Jeremy the right to make in-season decisions that would prevent something like this. Like, if we could give them the power to be like, nope, you're promoting those guys because they're obviously you're obviously trying to game a matchup.
Right. Well, I think this is something that all will be fixed in the off season, or I have faith that it will be.
Yeah, and that's the overarching piece I want to make sure we reinforce is I trust Jeremy and Goose's commissions. I think this will end up in the right spot. It's just one of those where, to use dad language, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
It did make me miss Lewis for about 5 minutes, though.
We're all slightly disgusted. We scoffed a little bit, but it's one of those things that we're not going to take our ball and go home. We're just going to wait for it to get fixed.
All right. So now that we've beaten this horse to the point where it's past the glue factory, where the glue factory doesn't even want it anymore. Looks like so the Bears turn Vincent Smith, Vinny Curry, Brennan Carr, Dontrell Inman, and Wesley Woodyard into Two Force and Brandon Copeland. I don't think really that impacts their chances too much this year. They're still the team to beat in the NFC North. And they are they actually just barely moved in front of the Chargers for the points for on the year by 30. So, it's one of those where maybe I could understand, Matt, where you would want to knock this team out of the playoffs if you could. He's
been ahead of me for a couple weeks now. We've been dancing. I made a little tiny bit of ground this past week by 3 points or something. But yeah, him and I have traded blows on the actual points for lead until I think week 6, where he had that big 300-something point game and he just ran away with it. Then my team's been relatively quiet for a Chargers team the past couple of weeks. But yeah, no, it's I would love to see that team not make the playoffs because holy shit. If somebody else is scoring more points than me, I would vastly prefer them to not be in the playoffs. Thank you very much.
So because this team's already given me a loss, I don't know. I would prefer not to see them in the playoffs, but I don't feel like I'm as fearful of them as I should. The first thing I do is I look at the running backs, and I think that's a who's who of relative nobodies other than Cohen and Madison. So I feel like at some point the production's just going to fall off, and that may be a huge threat in the postseason.
Yeah, it's a team where, if you look at it and you just, scroll through it, you're like, wow, this team isn't actually that good. But then, the way I look at it is he's just so deep that,
he is the quintessential best ball roster.
Yeah.
Yes.
My team, I feel good about it every single week. But, if Eckler and Jordan don't have good weeks, I just don't have a running back. And, my offense then becomes, okay, well, I better hope Kenny Golladay and Amari Cooper show up. Well, with Goose, it's Alexander Mattinson didn't do anything. Well, I'm sure Raheem Mostert or Ogun Dare, whatever the hell his last name is, or Pollard will do something. And it's just guys on guys on guys on guys on guys on guys that can step up and fill in any given week.
Right.
And it's kind of terrifying.
Right. Just for that, because of depth. I mean, when you go through it and you look and no defensive end has scored less than 60 points, that's ridiculous for a position where a lot of people are still scrambling and looking at free agents. That's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just a team that unless you bring your best, you're going to lose to them.
Yep. I'd imagine he probably would wish his record was a little bit better.
Yeah, but that's the thing. He's had, compared to previous years, he's had teams bring their best 4 weeks out of the 12 game or 4 out of the 12 games he's played. He's gotten the best from teams, and that's where he's lost. But
right.
It's if you don't bring your best, you just lose because his floor is ridiculously high.
Is it? Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
220 plus almost every week. Yep. Only 1 week under 200.
Is a very consistent team, and then then he has weeks where he scores 352.
Yeah, that was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next team in the North, the Lions, who ended up being buyers. So last week, going into the week, they were in last place in the NFC North, behind the Packers on tiebreakers, and then they went shopping, trading Terrence Mitchell, their 2020 fourth and their 2021 fourth, the Cowboys fourth, Darrell Henderson, Andy Isabella, Leonard Floyd, their 2021 1, 2, and 3, and their 2023, basically just in my third. So basically emptying all of their picks to make a push this year. In the process, picking up Kenyon Drake, Adam Thielen, Anthony Walker, the Cowboys 2021 fourth, and Justin Coleman. This worked out well considering what Kenyon Drake did on Thursday night. So they have moved ahead of both the Packers and myself to the point where they're now second place in this. So despite Adam Thielen not doing anything last week, and I think potentially being out this week, this is a team that is right there in the hunt for the wild card once again, which is unfortunate for any of us still trying to make it.
So my first question is, since we're like in the heat of this division, what the hell are all of you guys going to do when you all lose to like the suboptimal team in your division and you're all like 9-7 at the end of the like?
That'd be a beautiful day, RJ.
Like I just have a feeling that's going to happen in this division. Like everybody's going to have a winning record, but it's not going to be like nobody's going to get to double-digit wins, and it's just going to be like who squeaked it out.
I mean, then Goose would just make it in because this league actually, for some reason, doesn't care about division record.
Yeah, points for is the tiebreaker before division conference record before division record. So literally, you are never getting to division record.
Yeah, which is just ridiculous. Like that. Before we even go in on the taxi stuff, that is the motion I'm moving to change this summer because it's like. I think it's cool and like really it's a nice flavor to the league to actually give a shit about your division. I don't really have to because I've got the Raiders and the Broncos. But like the Browns and the Bengals, like the Browns should be ahead in the AFC North because they're winning their division. They're 4-1 versus 3-2. And so like it just, to me, the flavor of the divisions is so much cooler when it actually matters instead of just like, well, you won more than these guys, or you scored more points than these guys. Here's $20.
So back to the actual team. I'm a huge fan of this team and the way it's built, mostly just because of Chris Carson. And I think if they can cover that gap between them and Goose, I think this team can actually do something.
Yeah, I like Lions.
Darren Fells is like an unsuspecting star at tight end.
What pisses me off about Lions is he did like 90% of the work that he needed to do with those trades, but he didn't do that last 10% where he trade extends Adam Thielen.
Yes.
So now he's stuck with only his 3 extensions and a bunch of dudes that need to be extended. Like he traded for Coleman, right? He should have extended Coleman more than likely. He's a cornerback, so it doesn't really matter. But 100 points at cornerback is good. Even if it is already $3 million, he's still got a good amount of cap that he can play with around that. You extend Thielen because he's a $9 million guy, and he's not going to get much more expensive than that. But I do see part of the issue is he's sitting at $669,000 in cap space. So he probably needed to do something like drop a Sheldon Rankins that is just not doing anything for him.
Yeah.
But if this team hits, this team is going to pop off against people. But it's just a matter of it's another team that is relatively light on the meaningful positions on IDP. Like, it's a consistent thing in this league where most of the like mediocre teams have a bunch of safeties, but they don't have defensive ends. They don't have a lot of linebackers. Like, he's not too bad at linebacker. He's got 4 guys that are above 85 points, 2 of which are above 100. But Like, you need more depth. You need fewer cornerbacks. You need fewer safeties. Like, turn one of these 90-point safeties into a linebacker that scores 80 points, just to give yourself a little bit higher of a floor.
Well, I think when it comes to that, it's a little bit of like a conflicting philosophies. A lot of us do understand the value of like IDP players.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, like in general IDP, safeties do score a lot of points.
Mhm.
So like a lot of people do value safeties right up there with defensive ends and
Yeah.
linebackers. Like I know I got to a point where I was accumulating safeties just because I was like, oh, they're so cheap. Until you come to the realization that in best ball you don't need a mass amount of them, you just need a higher end one.
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost like somebody needs to throw a master class for like, this is the general belief of IDPs that you should be doing with this league.
Well, that's something we can do in the off season.
Most definitely. All right, moving on to a team that nobody really cares about. It's the Vikings. So let's see, what did they do at the deadline?
I don't know, what did they do?
Not much.
A lot of dumb shit. Got Lamar Miller off their contracts. Gave up Rashad Higgins, Ogletree, Malcolm Jenkins, and Eric Whittle, which were a bunch of expiring contracts. 3 first-round picks, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and a third, as well as Rashawn Evans. In return, they got Mason Rudolph, Malcolm Butler, the Steelers 2023, Dalvin Cook, Tyreek Hill, and Earl Thomas.
How do you have so many damn trade extensions?
So I just used them wisely.
He manages the Google spreadsheet and he just never took them down.
But yeah, but
I'm joking.
I was gonna say I have no access.
5 players that were trade extended this year. I'm assuming you didn't do all 5 of them because
no, he traded for 2 of them if I'm not mistaken.
But like who trade extended players and then I was like, I'll trade them.
I mean I got rid of Whitehead right before he went on a Twitter tangent.
That's reasonable. The Jermaine Whitehead?
Yeah.
Nice.
He was somebody that I at first regrettably got rid of, but I guess I dodged a bullet.
Yeah, I mean, you probably watched him play football and was like, wow, this dude sucks. Good thing I traded him. And then he got on Twitter and threatened to murder some people.
Yeah. But back to the Vikings moves. They're all good. My only thing is, and like you could say the same for the Lions, like you're already in a really good situation, so I don't really know about getting rid of like leveraging your future for like production while your division's already like muddled as it is. So
the logic here, to clarify a couple things, is 1, I felt like I was in the race. I wanted to make sure I stayed in the race. But 2, one of the things I recognized last year with acquiring as many picks as I did, and going into this, let's just kind of recap. I gave up 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and a third. So that accounts to 7 picks, 28 years of picks. I have 96 years right now, potentially more, depending on taxi or IR or otherwise. With what I have left, I have 2 firsts, 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, 3 thirds, a fourth, and a fifth. So that's 6, 9, 11 picks. So that's 44 more years that I have already after moving these picks. So basically, I can either move these picks into something that are more productive for me next year, and again, better than I would get with that pick anyway, or I keep those picks and I have to scramble to figure out how I'm going to keep all those years and still hit the cap floor.
Right. I agree with the mentality, and I agree with the players that you picked up in Cook and Hill. And if it wasn't for the fact that they were out there and available, I probably would have questioned it more. It's just just one of those things like you could have ducked out of this year because like it's already a mess as it is in the division.
Mhm.
And then turn those picks during the offseason when they're at prime value into something like a Julio, but also saying that like a Julio, that's basically Tyreek Hill, like points for cost. So like,
Right.
I think
And
it was
I was about 6 years younger than that. And while I did extend him a little bit here to put him at the same price point as Julio, I still have my renegotiation, which I plan on using for Tyreek Hill this offseason,
right.
which should bring
So
him
like,
back to like a 15 or 16 million point.
I think the only place where I differ is preference on when you wanted to pull the trigger,
Right.
which like it's irrelevant. Now you're just going to take a shot at this season and get a couple extra bucks in your pocket if all goes well. So like I can't fault that.
Yep.
My counter to that is like you would think in this league those picks get valuable come the off season like every other league, but then there's like things. There's just like yes, but also no. I feel like these players probably weren't going to be available to Mike. Like this quality of player wouldn't have been available to Mike.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So like if you told me that Mike could have waited to trade for Dalvin Cook and Tyreek Hill level players in the offseason and paid maybe a little bit less, I would take it. But I just don't think he got that opportunity. And Mike, now I am just even more upset that I wasn't going to be able to pull the biggest switcheroo of the century if you had waited and instead gone with a tag option on Tyreek Hill, knowing that you're now going to renegotiate him, because I was going to try and snatch him up with that tag because of the whole claiming thing, and then you would have had to either take a massive overpay or a 2020 first. So congrats on landing Tyreek long term, though, I guess.
Thank you.
And Cook, I mean, for the foreseeable future, Cook is, like one of the more valuable.
He's still getting paid a shit ton, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at it, like some of the like higher end running backs just are way too expensive.
Dude, me paying Jordan Howard $19 million, almost $20 million, makes me sick to my stomach every single time I open up my team page.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
like
going to have to extend Cook this offseason too. So
paying running backs is a trap. Unless they're Austin Eckler and you get them for under $1 million.
All right. Last but not least is Jeremy's team, the Green Bay Packers. So was pretty adamant that they were going to go for it with the team they had, not buying, not selling, but definitely not in the selling phase. Didn't make any moves, but is now at the bottom of the division at 6-6 after the Lions picked up Kenyon Drake and kind of used that to run roughshod over him. So I think he's now moved fully into spoiler move. Quick look. Lucky for him, he had Brandon Allen last week because that was the starting quarterback, not Aaron Rodgers. The rest of the offense is in pretty good shape, although kind of fading a little bit. I think that Alshon contract is going to be a tough one to hold for the next couple of years unless he moves it this offseason and minimizes his long-term hit there. Dion has not been what has been hoped at the linebacker position, but he's had others kind of step up there. So, again, I think he's kind of about to move into not quite a rebuild, but a reload, but not necessarily, the best spot to be in either.
For a team that doesn't have any of its picks, it's in a really, really, really bad spot, in my opinion. Because he's just lacking in offensive talent outside of Chubb and Fournette. He's got Sutton, Sutton's going to be really good, but like even then, this is almost like a copy of the Steelers from the AFC North, where it's just like he's got a couple guys that are just like studs, but other than that, there's just no depth at all. which sucks, and that Alshon Jeffrey, that contract for Jeffrey is just going to be an albatross. But yeah, it's just like total lack of depth on defense, which it's sometimes how things go, but it's also just how he built his team.
So like I feel like this team is really good if you have all your picks.
Yep.
But that's just not the case. Like you have some gems on defense, but you have a lot of like aging veterans that you'd like to start to phase out and have picks to accumulate more of them. Just can't though.
Yeah, if you told me this team was going into a draft where it could spend every single round just drafting an IDP guy, it'd be good.
Correct.
But that's not where Jeremy's at. It's just like the fact the massive gulf of difference between this team having no picks and all of its picks is just so huge, because there's no path for him to reasonably and realistically reload this team, because he's not going to have anywhere close to the amount of salary cap other teams are going to have. What his biggest contract coming off is Alan Lazard and Brandon Allen. Like, those are his two big contracts coming off, while there's teams that have singular contracts worth more than that coming off the books this summer.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty sure I have more money coming off the books than that, and like he's just in a very rough place for his team.
I mean, ideally, you would have wanted to pick up Brandon Allen and then run to the closest team that could afford him, that had like an excessive amount of 4th and 5th round picks that was in the hunt, and just kind of like throw that at him. Since that wasn't done, going to go into the offseason with no picks and try to accumulate them then.
I don't know why teams are so silly about backup quarterbacks that get a couple spots start out the season. Like, it's obviously they're not in this division, but like Redskins. Like, why did he pay almost $12 million for Matt Moore?
Well, I mean, I think the thought process there was to buy wins away from you, but it just didn't happen because you were able to, like, you were able to trade for like a reasonable replacement, but you were also able to just replace those points with excess points at other positions.
Yeah, but it's like, what? Like, does Redskins own my first, Mike? Do you know that? Because I don't know how to check without the trade tab.
Hold on, I'm checking right now.
Future picks. 1 second.
I have it up right now. Yes, he does own your first.
Okay, that would explain.
And my first.
I didn't realize he had that. That makes much more sense. What is this one? Okay.
All right. So moving along to our next division, we have the NFC South. Last week, Panthers and Saints were within a game of each other, 7-4 and 8-3. I think we looked at it and said, "Hey, the Panthers still have a shot to take this thing," and then the Saints beat the Panthers. So now they have a 2-game lead, and I think actually the tiebreaker on the Panthers. So the South is theirs to lose. Panthers can still get in the last wild card, fighting the Lions, myself, and the Packers for that. But again, it's a different division. Falcons have knocked themselves out of the race, taking the loss last week, as well as losing Gardner Minshew. So really, it's kind of a straightforward division. Looks like it's the Saints division with the Panthers maybe sneaking in as the wild card. Quick look at the Saints in terms of moves made. So a couple of, I think they may have had one that was moved and moved back. So I'm not going to really touch on that one, but sent out CJ Mosley and the Bears 4th. And in response, got Vincent Smith, Christian Jones, the Chargers 5th, and that's that. So, it's a good risk by you, RJ, if Mosley doesn't head to the IR. I haven't really checked recently, so he may already be there. But if he doesn't go to the IR, then that's a nice add for you for the playoffs. If he does, then that's a reasonable price for a linebacker of his quality going forward.
Man, I wish I could have paid Christian Jones in a 5th-round pick for C.J. Mosley when I traded Christian Jones in a 5th-round pick for Ryan Grant.
Yeah, I don't know. That was just like a Hail Mary that got accepted.
I guess I'm sending trades to the wrong people.
No, right now I have like a conversion rate of like 1 in 300 on those Hail Marys. So I'd imagine you probably are doing the same amount of legwork, but eventually it's going to pay off for you.
1 is still greater than 0, right?
Yeah.
Gotta go with the binary format.
I want to say I understand him accepting that just because he wants the production right now from Christian Jones. I don't.
He probably saw the writing on the wall that his farm team Buccaneers was going to get booted, so he needed to win now so he didn't have to worry about farming people later.
Right, which I also have the. We'll get to the Bucks when we do, but that trade that got reversed, like I think all of us would have traded for a reasonable kick returner if we had the opportunity.
I had multiple defensive tackles I would have traded for that dude if I knew that the option was, oh, just trade me a defensive tackle that's going to end up on IR.
Right, for the sake of staying in the league, I would have made a trade that didn't look so off-putting.
Like, it's just
Granted, he ended up on IR later that night. Like, he got hurt in the game after the trades happened. So,
and it was still a defensive tackle that had scored 12 points.
Right.
Like, you can get that off of the fucking waiver wire right now. Like, let me go add drops. Points.
But
defensive tackle Al Woods, 42 points.
I dropped him a couple of weeks ago. The Saints making the other trade for Vincent Smith. Looking at both of the trades, the one with the Bucks that got reversed and making the other trade with the Bears, like I see what he was trying to do, like just shoring up his wide receivers, get like an extreme boom bust, maybe get like 12 points out of somebody one game in the postseason or something like that, because he is very thin at that position. I know he's just crossing his fingers, hoping the team stays together, no major like injuries or anything like that. And he should have at least a respectable finish.
Yeah, I mean,
he's paper thin at every position. So like, other than defensive tackle and tight end, if somebody gets hurt, like he could see like, what's his schedule look like?
He plays
Panthers, Texans,
Colts, Vikings, Buccaneers.
Yeah, so he has
one guaranteed win there.
Right. So yeah,
and I think they're split on head-to-head, so it would come down to points for between the Saints and the Panthers. So there's still a chance that Panthers could win that division out over the Saints.
Exactly.
Which, given they only have one for sure win and they're super paper thin, they could end the season like 10-4 or 10-6.
Yeah, that's a very realistic possibility.
And then the Panthers just have to win 3 and beat them on points for. Not easy, but also not exactly like impossible. He has a good week 12. That's 2 wins right there, possibly.
Right.
Because I don't think he plays World Beaters week 12, does he?
All right.
No,
get moving in again because I'm going to have to hit the stop button in about 30 minutes here to go pick up the kid. Panthers are next, 7-4, or 7-5 at this point. 2 behind. 7. Shit. Let me just look at this again. Got this backwards.
They are
7
yeah.
Sorry. 7-5, 2 behind the Saints. Made a bunch of moves. Not a bunch of moves, but moved a bunch of stuff in 2 deals before the deadline. A bunch of side pieces and Henry Anderson, as well as 2/3 to the 49ers for Greg Olsen Pierre, and DJ Hayden. And then same kind of deal with Ryan Grant and the Seattle 2022, which should be relatively early, for Robbie Anderson. So going for it without necessarily going all in, but that's probably a top 40 pick that got sent for Robbie Anderson. I'm not sure if I agree with that valuation. But that said, still in the mix on it. And, if he doesn't catch up to the Saints, is still very much alive, if not maybe the favorite in the wild card for wild card 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's no real crazy trades. That Niners trade for Olsen that he sent the 2/3. That kind of, I've been trying to get at the Niners to grab some of his one-year guys that just weren't going to get any comp picks. But as soon as I saw 2/3 go over for something, I knew that deal was dead. So it's like he didn't make bad trades, but I am also not like crazy about him because like Henry Anderson's he's still got spunk in him, and it's just he's been injured. And I'd rather have Henry Anderson than Greg Olsen, I think, because tight ends are meh. Well, defensive ends are like actually meaningful players. But he did have a massive hole at tight end, so
Yeah.
I mean, so this team was just taken over this week, and I do have to say this would be like the ideal team to just walk into a new league and have, especially just like walking in and contending. I think if they can sneak into the playoffs, they're going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah. Well, assuming that Joe Mixon actually wakes up from his Rip Van Winkle slumber, that would help a lot.
Well, the alarming thing is that their record with like Melvin Gordon being non-existent and Joe Mixon being not super relevant. So
Yeah.
like if
At
both
some
of them
point,
wake
if
up,
you're going to perform, and holy shit, if they're scoring points too, then everyone's screwed.
right, then I don't see like a sub 200 week out of them.
yeah. No, this is outside of this is the exact opposite of Goose. Like this team is built to just pop on weeks. And if it doesn't pop, it's not going to pop. Like his team's just not going to do well, which is both great for playoffs and horrendous. But the fact that he's still competing while having Sam Darnold do nothing, Melvin Gordon do nothing, and Joe Mixon do nothing is a really good spot for him to be in. He just has so many guys that are like Tyler Boyd's going to go down now that AJ Green's back. Pettis is dead. Cooper is going to be fine rest of the season, assuming he doesn't get his yearly concussion down the stretch. Robbie Anderson's just hoping Robbie Anderson is only as good as Sam Darnold's going to be. So that's kind of like doubling down there. But yeah, no, he's got a lot of good IDP guys. Like this is probably one of the better IDP teams I've looked over since joining the pod today. Just from like a pure point standpoint.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, moving on to the league villain, the Falcons. So in terms of what he gave up at the deadline, Justin Coleman, Michael Thomas, the safety from not the good one, his 2023rd, Ben Watson, Shaq Thompson, the Bears 23rd, the Texans 2023rd, and the Giants 2020. Did I go too far? Yeah, I went too far. Bears, Thompson, Watson. All right, so covered what he sent out. What he got back was their carrier and the Bills' first in the Thompson deal. Justin Simmons, who has since hit the wire.
And Derek Carrier did.
Yeah. I mean, he traded for Simmons to extend him, but he didn't have any extensions left.
Yep. And then Terrence Mitchell, as well as the Lions 2020 4th and 21 4th, and the Cowboys 21 4th as well. Oh, and Josh Gordon. I'm not going to spend much time here because it's going to frustrate me and piss me off because there's another fact I'm not sharing right now that I think is better that I leave outside of public, domain here. So
that Josh Gordon contract is going to suck as bad as a $5.5 million contract can suck for 3 years. And I think it just adds insult to injury that happened when he could have extended Justin Simmons instead. So, but I mean, other than that, it's a team that has a handful of good players and a lot of shit. And if he doesn't hit on his picks, he's fucked. So
that can kind of be said for everybody, though. So,
well, wait, like some teams, like they already have players on the roster that are good. That are like, I obviously don't need draft picks because I don't have any. But like this team is not a team that is going to be built. Like this is the exact opposite problem as the Raiders, I think. Where like the Raiders is going to hit on enough picks, but he's never going to have enough picks at the same time. While this team just like if they don't hit on good picks, it's just going to be trapped in mediocrity forever.
Yep. A lot of bright spots right now, but those bright spots won't do anything unless the other picks come to fruition.
Yeah, he'll have a lot of players he can taxi next season to specifically lose games. But
all right. Next we have Buccaneers. New owner with us now, 1-10.
Welcome,
1-11.
Tyler.
Yep. Welcome,
I'm
Tyler.
sorry.
I'm glad that you're here. No, I will not gift you back your pick.
Get brownie points for not being old Bucks, but that's it.
But yeah, I'm not going to spend much time here. I think this team is in full rebuild for sure. If it was difficult to get someone to take the Broncos with the Zeke contract, I can only imagine what Goose and Jeremy had to give up to get Tyler to take this team. But I'm not going to spend much time here. There's not a lot to talk about.
Just he needs to sell everything. If he can get value for a player that's on this roster, he should just sell them immediately.
Agreed. When your best assets are an overpriced Todd Gurley and an undercosted Zach Pascal, there's cause for concern.
I'll tell you right now. Hey, Mike, do you know when we get access to our 2022 picks?
I don't off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the bylaws.
If that, I hope that's before. Actually, do I have my third still or no? Do I have that third? No, I traded it. I'm an idiot. I mean, like somebody realistically should just trade for Justin Simmons and just tag him, because like you don't have to tag him at the $7 million one, but like if he can turn Justin Simmons into a fourth and then or tag him for a third, like that's a reasonable contract for Justin Simmons.
Well, that's the thing. He's going to have Dalton come off his contract, come off his cap at about $25 million, so he's going to have the space. So throwing the RFA tag on him might still get something rather than nothing. So that's why before he even showed up, I was saying, hey, a responsible owner for the Buccaneers would tag or claim Justin Simmons.
Yeah, I'm glad that he did that. This team's going to take a lot of work. Like it looks like sell anything of relevancy for anything you can get in the offseason and kind of just start from there.
Agreed. All right, on to a competing team. Like I said, I've got about 15 minutes before I have to jump off, guys, so I'm going to try and move through a couple of these a little bit faster, but some I'll make sure we spend the adequate amount of time on. Eagles, RJ, of course, your team being 10-2, although the race just got a lot more interesting with Giants winning last week, Cowboys and Redskins at 3-9 and 1-11, although Cowboys won unexpectedly, despite trying their best to lose. But, pretty straightforward. You and Giants are going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of who's the wild card and who wins the division.
Yep. I feel like I got a lot better at the trade deadline.
Yep.
As you said on the last podcast, my defense was a cause for concern. Not to say every concern is shored up, but if CJ Mosley comes back, then I'm in a really good spot, I feel like.
I was wildly impressed that you got Brandon Graham for what you did. I think that was the steal of the deadline for you. That solved a whole mess of problems. And,
I agree.
Now you kind of have that tent pole at D end, at D tackle, at linebacker, at corner, at safety. So it's a matter of who shows up as either your second person in some of these positions or flex. So, like you said, I think you got a lot stronger at the deadline.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the Giants. In terms of their deadline activity, they sent out Justin Simmons and a couple picks. What did they get back? They got Michael Thomas, the Falcons 2023, and Jake Kumaro. Except for maybe improving your third, I don't like this very much. With Adams back, Kumaro probably fades back into obscurity. So paying $1.6 million for someone who's probably not going to do much is not a great call.
I think that was more reactionary because we just came off of the decent game. So like it's reasonable to assume that he may show up at a later date in the season, and that may be like a crucial couple of points that a wide receiver needs.
That said, Lamar Jackson at $3.5 million, solves all manner of sins, and at some point, Odell Beckham is likely to show up. So
yeah, it's not fun to be in a division where Lamar Jackson is under $4 million.
Yeah, what's it like having a division opponent that you actually have to trade blows with?
Going into Sunday night, I'm like, I kind of assumed Lamar Jackson was going to go off for like 40, and I figured all I needed was like my floor out of both of my running backs, and then I got a lot less than their floor and shit the bed this week. So Lamar Jackson's terrifying to look at.
Can you imagine how scary that Giants team would be if Antonio Brown and Odell were actually playing and performing to their ceilings?
It
would be ridiculous.
If AB was actually playing, he wouldn't be on the Giants.
That's true. But you say he signed somewhere after you cut it, then he would be on the Giants.
This is true. I can't argue that. All right, moving on to the Cowboys. Let's see, in terms of what he sent out, it was
everything.
Drake, and Thielen. We'll come back in a second here, RJ. Then you jump in. In terms of what he got, a bunch of, let's see, Henderson and Isabella, who I think were both firsts last year, plus the Lions 21 first, 21 second, 21 third, and Leonard Floyd as well. Although Floyd, it looks like, is only one more year on his contract, which seemed off to me. Yeah, that seems to be the case. He was won an auction, not actually. Maybe that was just the first year or something like that. But anyways, again, I think he got better. He got better long term at the deadline, got worse, but still, because he picked up Isabella's points, he ended up beating the Redskins.
I mean, he gave up pretty much everything of worth on his roster. Got back a reasonable amount of picks.
He's got TJ Watt still, but yeah, and Eric Reed.
But I think that was the right move, especially given his win-loss record.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's in a good spot. Like, I don't know what all picks he does have, but any picks he does have this coming year and the next year, both are all in good spots at least.
He has his first rounder, his in the Seahawks second rounder. Nothing of like major relevancy. I think just only his picks until we get into 2021.
Yeah, which that's reasonable, because then he's gonna have a lot more. He's gonna have a lot of guys that, like, he should probably trade TJ Watt this offseason. Like,
right,
get that out of the way right now. Maybe even try and do it before the try and do it right after week 17 before the rollover. Trade TJ to somebody, and then he should be able to extend them, I believe. Correct, Mike?
Yeah, so TJ's got 2 years left.
2 years. So, yeah, dude, like, Cowboys, if you were out there, sell TJ Watt after the season, and you can get more, because that team won't have to use a trade extension, which means the contract will be cheaper.
I think all of his moves are exactly what you want to do when there are two teams so drastically higher than you in your own division that look like they're going to be there for at least the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
well, at the very least, he was up there, I think, last year, but ran into some hard time this year. But
Right.
anyway, Redskins we'll go through real quick. Kumaro for a third and a fourth. Nothing earth-shattering there. Clearly rebuilding and doing so in style. So moving on to the NFC West. Again, the Cardinals clinched the division at 9-3 because the next highest team is 4-8. So at least you were 11-1, Matt, because clinching your division at 9-3 seems kind of good for you. That's all I can say. But in terms of their deadline moves, they didn't do anything. So they moved back in without necessarily. I think they were undefeated going into the playoffs last year, in not necessarily the same strength of position this year. Relying on Edelman and Sanders kind of as their go-tos, and then a strong IDP defense. But I think we had said this team's going to make the playoffs and be done in the playoffs, and I could see whatever team makes the makes it as a wild card having a pretty good chance here.
Yep. I mean, they were undefeated last year. I think it's a good team, but most likely a one and done in the postseason. Everybody that they retained from last year kind of just fell off a step, while everybody that they brought in didn't make up that gap.
Yep. All right, continuing on, because it looks like Matt has stepped away for a second. 49ers gave up Greg Olsen. Greg gave up Marcus Golden and some additional pieces. In response, got, as discussed, Jerick McKinnon, Cameron Wakes expiring, Henry Anderson, and then a couple of thirds and a fourth. Sorry, no, just a couple of thirds. The fourth is theirs. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's one of those where you're rebuilding, so you get what you can. Now that Foles is back, unfortunately, I think this is going to make this team a little bit more competitive than it wants to be. But not much you can do about that, really, without hiding points on Taxi Squad.
Yep. I mean, got rid of everything that was like usable by another team. So I mean, good moves, nothing crazy.
Talking about Redskins, I'm guessing.
No,
Niners.
Niners.
Well, that's a quick jump.
Yep. Moving on to the Rams. Didn't make any moves at the deadline. Pinged him a couple of times. So seriously, Johnny, what the fuck are you doing?
He's being offline for 26 days, 22 hours, and 36 minutes.
So yeah, commissioners, if we can actually do kind of a poll of folks who actually want to stay in this league, because those of us who like being here and like the league format are quite active, but stuff like this is, again, annoying. But yeah, we talked about him pretty well at the deadline as a seller, but again, has a couple of good pieces that could step in well next year, but likely has a couple pieces he probably has to turn over before he's going to be competitive again, like the Cam Jordan contract and others.
There's just so many of these teams have players that should have been moved that weren't. And I don't know if it's because they were lazy or if because they think they're getting more for them than they actually are. But it's like Trent Murphy, he's a defensive end that scored points. Like, move that dude. He's under $1 million. Like, get something for him. He's not going to get you a comp pick. But, like, move him for something. Like, package Trent Murphy, Tavon Wilson, and, I don't know, DeAndre Carter, who are all expiring dudes that come out to, like, I don't know, $3.5 million, $4 million. Like, combine those guys for, like, a fourth-round pick. It's more than what you'll get if you just let them walk. Like, that's, like, teams need to be doing that stuff. Like, going back to Niners, I know you guys already went over them, but, like, Mark Walton and Peyton Barber should have gotten him something at the deadline.
Yeah.
Especially since Mark Walton looked like the guy that was going to be running the show as the running back for the Dolphins, which, albeit isn't a super lucrative job, but it's something, especially when you combine him with Peyton Barber. Like, that's a pick there. Like, that's a pick that he lost out on that he should have gotten. And I don't know if it's...
As the current owner of the starting running back of the Miami Dolphins, I am offended by this comment.
I believe that all three of the teams, the Seahawks, the Niners, and Los Angeles, they all kind of fit into that same category. They had assets that they should have moved for something, and now they're going to get, in the grand scheme of things, nothing to next to nothing.
Did I miss getting to talk about the Seahawks, Mike?
No, the Seahawks are coming up right now.
I need to go on my regular.
And I'm really glad that they're still here because at least the Saints still have the Seahawks. I was really concerned we were going to leave the Saints without a farm team, but luckily the Seahawks are still here, so we still have that going for them, which is nice.
Yeah.
In terms of moves at the deadline, there were none. Should there have been some? Absolutely. But, I'm not going to go into specific detail. But, Matt, it sounds like you want to talk about something.
Well, I just think this dude's a clown. And I'll say it again, and I'll say it on every single pod I will ever be on until he proves me wrong about not being a clown. But it's just like what is this dude's roster? Like, his team's not good enough to have, why do you have Ronald Blair? Like, that dude is a defensive end with more than 60 points. Why is he on your roster when you're, 1-11, 2-10, something like that? Like, trade him for something. These teams need to learn that, as soon as the trade deadline hits, if you have a player that is not within reach of the top 20 or 30 at his position, you just need to trade him and combine him with other players and get something. Because, he's going to have – let's just go down the list of players on his roster that he probably thought he'd get something for that he didn't. Just off of defense, we've got Malik Collins. Sheldon Day is maybe something that can move something. Poona Ford, Ronald Blair, Jordan Lewis. These guys, Xavier Woods, all of those guys are one-year guys except for Xavier Woods. And they probably should have been combined for a fourth and just traded to somebody because they're not going to get you anything on that team other than points and risks of winning games.
He doesn't own his first.
Huh?
Falcons has his first.
Well, yeah, but he still has other picks. Does he own his third? He obviously doesn't own his second, but if he owns his third, okay, you're still tanking. Your team's not going to win anything.
Future draft picks. Check here.
I've heard so many people's response is, well, he doesn't own his first, to being well, they need to not make moves to be bad. But at the same time,
he has his first or his second. He has his third, fourth,
he
fifth.
just has his
second.
Yeah, he's got my second, so he'll have a pick that's effectively the same thing as his third. But I don't remember who it was. It's somebody, and this is just a general rant. Made a comment about somebody didn't have their first, so they shouldn't be making moves to get worse. That. It doesn't make sense. If you're 2-10, you trying to make moves to be better is only going to make your team worse in the long run.
The only time I've done something said something close to that is when I said the Bucs should pick up Simmons because
that makes sense.
They don't have their picks, but he's an asset, so being bad doesn't make sense. But he's a potential long-term asset.
Yep, that makes sense. That move makes sense.
When you are bad, acquire assets, whether it be picks or things you can move.
But I don't remember who exactly it was. It may have been either Falcons or Redskins said something, or even Browns. No, it wasn't Browns. Browns is intelligent. They said something along the lines of it didn't make sense for the Titans to trade you Cook and Tyreek Hill because they don't own their own first. But that is just such a backwards way of thinking about things. Just because your team is bad, if your team is bad, your team's going to be bad. Whether you own your own first is irrelevant. If your team is legitimately a long-term bad team, then you need to trade your players that are on one-year contracts.
It's informative, but it's in the long term, like you said, irrelevant. It's like you said, if you're 1-10 with those players, then you're not going to be any better without them.
As appealing as it is to be spiteful to somebody else and like kill their opportunity at like a higher pick, sometimes you're just doing yourself a disservice by not doing anything.
Right. Again, there's a league I'm in. I'm actually a commission that I thought I was going to be competitive year one. I had, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, James Conner, AJ Green, Brandon Cooks, OJ Howard. I thought I was going to be just out the door, like crushing it this year. I haven't won a single fucking game. Am I holding on to pieces and not selling as a result? No, I'm recognizing the position I'm in and selling to try and get better. So that's just the obvious piece. Like, if you do that, you're literally cutting off your nose to spite your face. So don't cut off your nose to spite your face. Make your team better.
Like, realistically, and I don't want to shit on Jeremy too much here, but what's the difference between Jeremy's team and the Seahawks team when you get down to what long-term assets they have? Neither of them own their own picks.
So you could say Nick Chubb and Kamara are equivalent.
Mhm.
You could say Leonard Fournette and maybe some of the Seahawks pieces are equivalent. I'd say Jeremy with Aaron Rodgers is better than the Seahawks with no quarterback.
Yep.
I'd say Courtland Sutton at receiver for Jeremy is better than what the Seahawks have at wide receiver. I'd say Deion Jones is a better asset than a lot of what. So I don't think that's a good comparison, but I get what you're trying to get to.
Let me get to that's the thing. I'm not done with the point on it. There is like a reasonable difference in the quality of players they have. The Seahawks only has only has 4 fewer wins. So like it's not that big of a difference between the two teams, despite the fact that there is a huge difference in the actual quality of the players on the teams. But Seahawks is at least like bad. And Packers at least like went all in with what he could. Like he just went all in with his remaining picks. Like you need to pick somewhere in the center. Like you either need to go all the way out or all the way in once you're at that point.
Right. All right. So that takes care of us for the league. Again, I think we touched on each of the teams. There were a couple teams, like we said, we were pretty impressed with what they got with what they had to start the trade deadline with. I think the Eagles, as well as quite a few other teams, set themselves up well for the playoff run. I think there were a couple teams we were a little puzzled by in terms of what they didn't do as discussed, as well as what they could have gotten. And maybe even gotten more of. But again, that's a topic for the offseason. That said, appreciate anyone who's listened this long in, because I'm sure we're probably, 2 hours and 17 minutes. Quite the conversation. But appreciate everyone listening to the pod. We'll plan to get one going a little bit closer to the playoffs as we talk about where teams are kind of sitting and what our picks are for where folks are going to finish. But again, appreciate everyone tuning in and hope everyone enjoyed it. Any feedback otherwise, let me, let RJ, let Matt know, and we'll try and incorporate in future stuff. So, RJ, any last thoughts?
Nope, I'm good.
Matt?
No, not for this. No, I'm good.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you guys soon.